Cham Vishnupad Param Savrajkachara Shtotarashatis Vaingres Abhayacharunda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Cham Vishnupad Param Savrajkachara Shtotarashatis Vaingres Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Kosamra Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Krantara Chima Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitya Gaura Premanande Hari Hari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, today we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 16, Giant Vijaya Cursed by the Sages. Text 13 and 14. Brahma Vacha Attatasya Shatim Devim Attatasya Shatim Devim Rishikolyam Sarasvatim Rishikolyam Sarasvatim Nasvaryam Anyudashtanam Nasvaryam Anyudashtanam Tishamatma Pyatripyata Tishamatma Pyatripyata Brahmavacha Atatasya Shatim Devim Rishikolyam Sarasvatim Nasvadyam Anyudashtanam Tishamatma Pyatripyata Brahmavacha Tatasya Shatim Devim Rishikolyam Sarasvatim Nasvadyam Anyudashtanam Tishamatma Pyatripyata Brahmavacha Rishikolyam Sarasvati Nasvadyam Anyudashtanam Tishamatma Pyatripyata Brahmavacha Tadasya Shatim Devim Rishikolyam Sarasvatim Shamatma Pyatripyatam Mataji Brahmavacha Tadasya Shatim Devim Rishikolyam Sarasvatim Nasvadyam Anyudashtanam Tishamatma Pyatripyata. Word Brahma, Lord Brahma, Uvacha, said, Ata, now, Tasya, of the Supreme Lord, Ushatim, lovely, Devim, shining, Rishikolyam, like a series of Vedic hymns, Sarasvatim, speech, na, not, asvadya, hearing, manyu, anger, dashtanam, bitten, tisham, of those sages, Atma, the mind, api, even though, atripyata, satiated. Translation by His Divine Grace of Acharya Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Brahma continued, even though the sages had been bitten by the serpent of anger, their souls were not satiated with hearing the Lord's lovely and illuminating speech, which was like a series of Vedic hymns. So text 14. Satim yadaya shinvato lakvim gurartakavaram vikaya kadakambiram navidostachikeshatam. Translation of Prabhupada by His Divine Grace of Acharya Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Lord's excellent speech was difficult to comprehend because of its momentous import and its most profound significance. The sages heard it with wide open ears and pondered it as well. But although hearing, they could not understand what he intended to do. Purport. It should be understood that no one can surpass the Supreme Personality of Godhead in speaking. There is no difference between the Supreme Person and his speeches, for he stands on the absolute platform. The sages tried with wide open ears to understand the words from the lips of the Supreme Lord. But although his speech was very concise and meaningful, the sages could not completely comprehend what he was saying. They could not even comprehend the purport of the speech or what the Supreme Lord wanted to do, nor could they understand whether the Lord was angry or pleased with them. Om Kyanatimirandasya Garananjana Shalakaya Chaksharan Militam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Putale Svayam Rupa Karamayam Dadate Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrachatam Sahakanarakunatam Vitam Tam Sachivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parichalsaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahakana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamshta He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandha Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Rishabhana Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Mancha Kalpitarupyascha Kripa Sindhya Bhaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai, auspicious start. It's so nice to hear the conch after the COVID period. So, yeah, welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class this morning. Thank you for coming. We are, today we just finally hear how yesterday was the last verse of the Lord speaking to the four Kumaras, and now we hear about their experience, how they actually could not understand what he was saying. So that's the main theme into these two verses. That on the one hand, like in text 13, we hear how they simply hearing the Lord, even though they couldn't understand anything, they were so pleased actually. They didn't want to stop hearing, but at the same time they couldn't understand anything. This was explained here. And like how come they didn't understand? Because the Lord's speech, it was quite like kind of a double talk. That on the one hand he was glorifying the Brahmanas, which referring to them, coming there as initially not pure devotees, as Brahmavadis, but then becoming transformed, as we know from the famous verse, Tasya Ravinda Nayanasya Padaravinda, how the aroma of his lotus feet mixed with those of the tulsi leaves entered their nostrils and transformed them into pure devotees. But up until that, they were, Brahmanas, Brahmavadis. And so the Lord, on the one hand, he glorifies them and apologizes so much on behalf of the his servants, the doorkeepers, that he even says, yeah, I'm ready to chop off my arms and things like that. And so we heard elaborately about that. And at the same time, he, even though on the one hand chastising his servitors, the Jai and Vijay, but at the same time he actually glorified them indirectly, or quite directly also in some verses. Like for example in text 7, he said, for example in text 7 already he glorifies his devotees, where he says that because I'm the servant of my devotees, my lotus feet have become so sacred that they immediately wipe out all sin, and so forth. And so, where he even takes, and that's an amazing purport where Prabhupada explains this reciprocation of how, on the one hand, the devotees, of course, they know themselves fully dependent on the Lord, and that anything good can only come by the mercy of the Lord, but the Lord, being so affectionate to his devotees, and also being unlimitedly humble, even though being the Supreme Lord, he also feels that actually the good qualities of him come due to his devotees. So that was one verse glorifying the devotees, but then in the verse after that, then he again glorifies the Brahmanas in general, about how he enjoys much more if someone offers food to Brahmanas rather than to the sacrificial fire. That's text 8. Then in text 9, again he goes back to the Vaishnavas, where he says, if I can take the dust of the feet of the Vaishnavas on my head, who will refuse to do the same? Where he continues from previously that his lotus feet become sacred by their mercy, so then he's eager to take the dust of their lotus feet. And further then, then comes a heavy verse where he tells about the living entities in general. And then in text 11, for example, again he glorifies his devotees, specifically how they kept it, like that's the most direct text in terms of where he actually shows that Jai and Vijay, in fact, he was not displeased by them, but he was very pleased. Even keeping aside that, actually they acted simply according to his will, he arranged that they would get cursed and thus enable him then to give him a good fight in the material world, in the body of demons. But aside from that, even simply by their reaction of how they took the curse of the Brahmanas, simply that captivates his heart. The Lord explained there that they captivate my heart who are gladdened in heart, and who their lotus faces, enlightened by nectarian smiles, respect the Brahmanas, even though the Brahmanas utter harsh words. So, I guess in this text it's most clear that actually he glorifies more the Vaishnavas than the Brahmanas, who he says he utter harsh words. But still, so the Kumaras were confused still. Is he actually glorifying us? Is he chastising us? And also one aspect I want to briefly bring out here is what Prabhupada also explains, that that like the Kumaras, how they could actually not only understand what he intended to do, which is says in the translation, but Prabhupada says then that they actually they didn't understand, even though his speech was very concise and meaningful. The sages could not completely comprehend what he was saying. They could not even comprehend the purport of the speech, so they didn't know what the meaning actually of what he was saying. Is he glorifying us? Is he chastising us? Or what the Supreme Lord wanted to do. Nor could they understand whether the Lord was angry or pleased with them. So in other words, they didn't understand anything. And that's quite significant, knowing that the qualification of the four Kumaras, who from birth were self-realized souls as Brahmavadis, and thus refused. That's how we know, that's, if you think back, that's how the whole pastime took off actually. How Lord Brahma was initially ordering them to create progeny, but they refused, and then out of his anger came Lord Shiva, and then he was so pleased when Swayambhuva Manu agreed, and then from there actually this whole pastime starts off. If you remember how Swayambhuva Manu was asking Lord Brahma, how can I fulfill my duty? There's the place you told me to go, it's not here, Mother Earth. So, and then that's how then we heard the description of Isvaresvara Prabhu, the Lord's wide-bore incarnation. And actually, and then this whole section of everything what we heard here, from a material external point of view, you could say, we are hearing all of that because Maitreya Rishi made a mistake. Because he starting off with Isvaresvara Prabhu answering to Vidura about what Swayambhava did. But then suddenly in his ecstasy, he inserted the Lord's killing Hiranyaksha, which he does as the Raktavara Prabhu. And so then, obviously, then Vidura is curious about that, and he asks about that, and then we hear all of this. But yeah, again, Srimad Bhagavatam, it's obviously I'm saying that's from external point of view, but we understand that, like my Guru Maharaj likes to explain those things that Srimad Bhagavatam, like many times you might get confused because chronology is not really much fully followed. But and with our linear thinking we might get confused about that. But in fact, we have to understand that Srimad Bhagavatam is not like an ordinary history book or anything like that. Rather, it's the literary incarnation of Krishna, and it's all about instilling the original pure devotion that all of us we have in our heart, and for that sake giving us transcendental knowledge, not for the sake of pumping up our intellect. So, yeah, like Guru Maharaj is saying, in Srimad Bhagavatam we have to understand chronology is not so important as ecstasy. And so that we see here also with Maitreya Rishi. In his ecstasy he had to tell about Hiranyaksha being killed by Raktavara Prabhu. So that's how we came here. So coming back to the point of the four Kumaras, that they could not understand what the Lord was saying here. But from like at this point, I guess it's because they are just beginning to turn away from Brahmavad and to pure devotion. So they still would have tried to use their intelligence by their strength to understand what the Lord is saying. And then, whereas for pure devotees we know it doesn't work like that. Rather, the Lord reveals in the heart what we need to know. Like if He is pleased with us or not, like it said here, they couldn't understand if He was angry with them or if He was pleased with them. And so like, yeah, I mean that's something we know Prabhupada would point out so many times of how real understanding of Krishna you can't get by material intelligence, but simply by pure devotion. Like one of the many quoted verses is from Bhagavad Gita, Yes. Bhaktya mama vichanati yavan yashasmi tatvataho tatamam tatvato kyatva vijare taranantaram. So that it is only by pure devotion that we can understand the Lord and go back to Godhead eventually. Whereas, and one point Prabhupada would mention sometimes is in this regard that one allegation that Mayavadis tend to make and also to justify why they are not practicing pure devotional service, but why they are doing their philosophical speculation, their studies in that way, is that they say, well, we are so intelligent, so we study the Vedas very thoroughly and speculate on them. But whereas bhakti, that's for those who are not so intelligent, like they're more like sentimentalists, like we know Prakashananda Saraswati accused as well to Mahaprabhu why he's engaging in this sentimental singing and dancing. Whereas Prabhupada would quote like Bhagavad Gita, the famous Chaturshloki verses of how it cannot be, or why it cannot be that a devotee is ignorant, a devotee is less intelligent, but that devotees are most intelligent. And that's, again, not from an external point of view, but material intelligence necessarily, but because Krishna himself is enlightening his devotees in the heart. As Krishna says in 10.10 and in 11, that Tisham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadadi buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. that those who serve me with priti, with affection, constantly, that I myself make sure that they get the intelligence by which they can come back to me. And that's the highest intelligence. Any other intelligence is secondary. And then further he explains in the next verse how, technically, how he does it. Tisham ivanukarpatam ahamma gyanacham tamaha nashayam yatmi bhavasto gyanadipena bhasvata. That I am situated in the heart, and I, with the torchlight of knowledge, I enlighten the devotee and eradicate all the darkness in his heart. So, and Prabhupada, he also, for example, specifically explained that in the Gachendra Mokshana Lila to one of the prayers of Gachendra, where he in Canto 8 text, Chapter 3 text 16, where Prabhupada in the Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita 10:11, and then he explains this verse very beautifully here, where it says, "For a devotee who has taken the lotus feet of the Lord within his heart, the Lord gives spiritual enlightenment, known as Jnana Dipa, by the special mercy from within." And he gives the analogy there that it is just, so it is, we know, spiritual knowledge actually, it's not something that we have to acquire, but rather it's something inherent in our heart, because as pure spirit souls, we are Satchidananda. So that's why what the Lord has to do is simply actually remove the ignorance in our heart, as he explains in that verse. And so this Jnana Deep, this torchlight of knowledge, therefore this Jnana is actually hidden within us. And so Prabhupada gives the analogy there that it's just as in Arani wood, the fire is hidden within it. So you don't, when you, like this wood specifically, it's mentioned that actually Brahmanas, by simply chanting mantras, they light it then for sacrifices and everything. So it's not that you have to bring a fire and somehow add it to the wood, but actually it's within the wood and you simply have to evoke it, the fire element. So in the same way, our knowledge, it simply needs to be revived by the Lord's mercy. So, and he explains that at the Mayavadi's allegation that the devotional path is for the unintelligent or uneducated has no grounds, because if the Lord gives enlightenment from within, how can one be in ignorance? Okay, so, and because, as I said, it's not about material intelligence to simply understand, as to some extent the four Kumaras might have tried here, to understand the Lord, but rather for pure devotees it's more about understanding the Lord, about feeling deeply in their heart what the Lord wants, and that they, first of all, the constitutional position that we are His humble servant, servant of His servant, and that the Lord is our everything. He's our only shelter, our refuge, and our master. But still, even though we don't need to extraneously acquire the knowledge, of course we know that it helps, and it's Prabhupada emphasized many times, we should read his books, we should hear, because it, first of all, it's direct association with Krishna, it purifies us, and also using our intellect to the extent that we can to understand, helps us also then to actually get this feeling, because as conditioned souls we have lost this feeling of full dependence on the Lord and of pure devotion to Him. So that's why, for example, in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Purushottama Yoga, Krishna explains beautifully how we are dependent on Him in many different ways, even for material life, as the moon that He gives succulence to the plants, and then as the digestive fire even helps us digest the food, and so forth, and of course the sunlight and everything coming from Him. And then he concludes with one beautiful verse of so now understanding, if the living entity, if he understands that how we are so dependent on the Lord, and the futility of material life, that's in the first part of the 15th chapter, and then we can much more easily with our full heart surrender to Krishna. So that's verse 15, 19, I believe. where Krishna says, Yumam evam asammuta chanati purushottamam sasarvavet pachati mam sarvabhavena bharata. That yumam evam asammuta, that those who completely unbewildered, chanati purushottamam, know me to be the supreme enjoyer, to be Purushottama, they are the sasarvavit, they are actually the knower of everything. So again, we don't need to acquire material knowledge like Prabhupada. He would many times also point out that how amazing it is actually that like any Prabhupada would face any challenges like a material scientist or different material fields of knowledge, and he would be able to defeat them very easily. And like how is that? We would say we don't study that all of these topics, but still we can have superior knowledge, and that's because obviously Prabhupada, he fully understood Krishna to fully meaning to the extent that a living entity can, and that the Lord wants him to understand. And in that way then he, like a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada is sarvavit, he knows everything. Everything needed which Krishna wants him to know, and Krishna is the source of everything, and he can give any knowledge that we need. So sarvavit bhajati mam, and so bhajati mam, he worships me. Krishna says sarva bhavana bharata. So if someone has this understanding of me, then he can give his full emotions, can sarva bhavana bharata, can fully give his full heart in serving me. And so now I want to come to Prabhupada explaining here how the Lord's speech is so amazing, his speaking, and how we see here, although it was very concise and meaningful, the sages could still not understand it, comprehend the meaning of it. So, similarly, I'm reading currently towards the end of 8th canto, where the pastimes of Lord Vamanadev, and they are also found quite striking in this regard, that how we see here even those great sages could not understand. And there, when Lord Vamanadev tells to Bali Maharaj about how justifying why he is not, why Bali Maharaj should give charity, and then also why he's not asking for more than 3 steps of land and all of that. And it's quite bewildering in some parts of it. But actually, and Srila Prabhupada doesn't even explain any of those aspects. So I'll come to it, explain it. But and I'm thinking that shows that, we need to first of all understand that we can never fully understand Krishna, and what we have to understand, how we have to understand that we are given by our spiritual masters, by Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya. So beyond that, we don't need to speculate. And so in terms of the pastime there, it actually, so 8th canto, it starts off with describing how Swayambhuva Manu was towards the end of his pastime, so who is the first Manu, and then Shukadeva Goswami continues with describes all the other mantras, even all the future ones. And so in course of them, that he describes Gachendra Mokshana Lila, and then in the Chakshusha Manvantara happens the churning of the milk ocean, which started off, we heard that some time ago also, where we heard about Durvasa Muni's pastimes. So he plays a role there also, where we heard how he gave a garland once to Indra, and who disrespected it by giving it to Airavata, who trampled on it. And that's how Durvasa Muni got offended there and cursed him to be bereft of all his opulence, lose his power. And so that's how then they lost against demons, and then how they approached the Lord, first Lord Brahma, and then who approached the Supreme Lord who for shelter, for advice, who told them then to make a truce with the demons and engage them in churning the milk ocean. And so, one funny thing there I found is that you might think that, well, the demons, they had the upper hand at that point. Why would they agree with the demigods to help them in churning the milk ocean for getting nectar? Looks like risky. Why would they even do it? But Prabhupada explains that the demons on their part were thinking that anyway the demigods are weak now, so we do it together with them, so rather they were thinking we engage them, and then when we get the nectar, we'll immediately snatch it and use it. Then we can even substantiate our upper hand even better. And of course, I don't want to go now into the churning of the milk ocean pastime. That's a huge pastime of many incarnations and many chapters, even going all the way then to Lord Shiva requesting the Lord also for seeing Mohini Murti, and so forth. But yeah, even actually in terms of the speech, the Lord's speech being perfect, but sometimes bewildering also. We see that even there with, when first, like actually with the demons thinking like that they would snatch the nectar. Actually, the Lord even fulfilled that desire initially. He, even though himself, as one of the incarnations there, as Dhanvantari, coming out with the nectar, that he actually allowed them to take the nectar from him. But then, of course, he cheated them very beautifully as Mohini Murti, as the most beautiful woman form of the Lord. And and there for example, he talked to the demons actually completely straightforward, and told them, like, you shouldn't trust me. I'm here, a woman loitering around without a husband. You absolutely shouldn't trust me. But the foolish demons, they actually took the Lord's speech as a joke. And so the Lord still bewildered them with his speech by speaking in such a way and chanting them in such a way that they thought that he's joking, even though he said the truth. So yeah, that's the beauty of the Lord's speech. And also, so then coming to, after the churning of the milk ocean, which happened in Chakshusha Manvantara, as I mentioned, and Bali Maharaj was taking part there as well. He was already there, king of the demons, but not as powerful as later then. And in fact, after the churning of the milk ocean, then there arose a huge battle, because the demons got angry when they realized, we have been cheated, and they tried to retaliate. And then the Lord also appeared again, helping the demigods, because at one point the demons took up to some black magic, because they otherwise couldn't defeat the demigods. And so in that way, then many of the demons got killed, actually, including Bali Maharaj. And so that's when their spiritual master Shukracharya revived them with special mantras. And that's how then Bali Maharaj felt so indebted to him for having saved his life, and that's why he then served him very faithfully, and then got the full blessings of Shukracharya, who performed a special sacrifice, I think called something like Vishvachit Yagya, where Bali Maharaj then became extremely powerful, where he emerged full of Brahma-tejas, of the spiritual power, and with all kind of new weapons and horses and everything. And actually, Prabhupada, he there explains how, so Bali Maharaj then, being extremely strong then at this point, then he went up to the heavenly planets and challenged Indra. And Indra could, even just by looking out, he could see how powerful Bali Maharaj was, and that he didn't even try to fight, but rather in fear he immediately ran to his spiritual master Brihaspati and asked him for advice what he should do. And so Brihaspati, actually, Prabhupada explains there in 8.15.28 that he informed Indra that Bali Maharaj's prowess was not his own, but that it was that of his exalted Guru Shukracharya. So said that, Prabhupada explains here then that understanding that even that was like on a material platform, even though Brahma-tejas comes originally from the Supreme Lord, but here manifesting in a material way of how powerful Bali Maharaj became there. but Prabhupada explains there in terms of understanding, that gives us a hint also of the potency of Guru Parampara, how it is possible for devotees to do such great things by this special spiritual technology, as my Guru Maharaj would many times say, which is Guru Parampara, following and serving the line of disciplic succession. So Prabhupada explains there that one should carry out the order of the spiritual master, and in this way, by the Parampara system, one can thus be endowed with the original spiritual power coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in fact, we know there's this famous, beautiful purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita where when Mahaprabhu tells Lord Nityananda Prabhu to not come every year for the Ratha Yatra with all the devotees from Bengal, but rather go and preach on his behalf, that he can do that which even Mahaprabhu can't do himself in terms of preaching. And Prabhupada gives many examples like Hanuman and everything, and explains how that's the amazing thing about Guru Parampara, that in fact the Lord is so pleased by someone following it that he empowers the disciples in there even more than himself. So not only his own spiritual power coming from him, but he wants to empower us even more than that. So that's the beginning of then how Bali Maharaj was then conquering heaven by not even fighting, because the demigods, they all were so fearful that they followed Brihaspati's advice that it's not the right time. Better you hide yourself, and so they did that. And so then Aditi, the mother of the demigods, she was very anxious and aggrieved at seeing her sons suffering in this way. And so that's when, like we saw earlier here in the third canto, how the pregnancy of Diti by Kashyapa Muni at this inauspicious time, how she was too impatient and too pushy, and that's how this inauspicious thing started off, being as the immediate reason for the appearance of giant Vichas, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. But on the other hand, like His Grace Abhishek Prabhu, some time ago, he explained those two pastimes and the contrast and lessons from that very beautifully. So with Mother Aditi, we see here, she was not like that. She was patient, so she didn't even go out of her way to request Kashyapa Muni for anything, but rather at one point when he saw her so aggrieved, he asked her, like, what's everything all right, and is all the religious principles properly followed and everything, and so forth. And she said yes, but then she explained how she was aggrieved because of that, and then but she didn't immediately say, okay, do this and you'll be fine, but rather he first pointed out to her that actually it is only the Supreme Personality of Godhead who can bestow all auspicious benedictions upon everyone, so upon you as well. And Prabhupada explains that because Aditi made her appeal to her material husband, but actually a material relative cannot do anything good for anyone. So, but material relative means if you are just on a material platform. But if such a relative, like in this case, like Kashyapa Muni, if he points us to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then of course that is most glorious, then he can help us. And so he assured her that the Supreme Personality of Godhead will fulfill all of your desires, for devotional service unto him is infallible. Any method other than devotional service is useless. And then he, again from his side, he doesn't show that he doesn't take any credit, even for anything good that he might be able to do for his wife here. But he explains that, I shall explain to you the same process Lord Brahma instructed me, by which Lord Keshava is very easily satisfied. So, and then he explained this Payavrata to Mother Aditi, of how, in which specific way she was there to engage in pure devotional service to the Lord. And I'll skip that. Just come. And then when the Lord, so she sincerely follows that, and then the Lord Vishnu personally appears to her. And one of the things he says there is also that, because I'm very pleased with you, and also he points out that because of Kashyapa Muni's austerities, I shall agree to become your son, and being your son, then I shall protect your other sons, who are the demigods. So, very again, we see that that the Lord points out to her as well that yes, it is because of you, but why because of you? Because you, also because of your spiritual master, or which in this case is the husband as well of Kashyapa Muni, giving credit to him again as well. And so then when Lord Vamanadev appears, there's a beautiful description of how he, like, Vamana means as a dwarf, so he appeared as a dwarf brahmachari, and at this occasion then also imagine the Lord appearing in such a form and all those great personalities assembled there, all the demigods, all the Brihaspati and great sages, the Sapta Rishis and everyone, and so they also perform the sacred thread ceremony for the Lord. So they immediately give him second initiation, and so during course of that, I'll just quickly mention a few points. So first of all, the sun god himself was personally uttered the Gayatri mantra for him, and then Brihaspati gave him the sacred thread. Kashyapa Muni gave him a straw belt. His mother Mother Aditi gave him a kopin. And the heavenly planets personified. Svarga gave him an umbrella. Lord Brahma gave him a kamandalu, water pot or vessel, and the Sapta Rishis, kusha grass, and so forth. And then, one other funny thing is that the treasurer of the demigods, Lord Kuvera, he gave him a begging bowl, and then Maya Devi, Mother Parvati, she gave him the first alms for that. So like that, it's really beautifully described how Lord Vamanadev appeared, and then how then later, when as he knew that Bali Maharaj was at this particular time performing a great Ashvamedha sacrifice in Brigukacha, then the Lord appeared there, and as we know famously, he was begging him for 3 steps of land, and Bali Maharaj, of course, he happily agreed, being a pure devotee, and then Lord Vamanadev, he immediately glorified him in a way that he made it very clear that, okay, now you can't take back your promise. So he said, Vachatava, so your speech is sunritam, not only nritam, not only true, but very true. So so you really can't take it back. So he makes it clear from the start there. And further, he glorifies him as that what you spoke is kula uchitam, it's befitting your great dynasty. And he further goes into that and glorifying his dynasty, and that's where the point I wanted to come to. And further it says it's dharma yutam, it's in perfect accordance with the principles of religion. And it's also yashakaram, it will spread your fame, your reputation far and wide. And so then he actually glorified the Bali Maharaj's dynasty of, his grandfather is Prahlad Maharaj, but other than that, it was all demons, but the Lord actually there and that's what I was mentioning before, that Prabhupada doesn't, in all those texts, he doesn't give any purport in terms of why the Lord is saying like that or anything, because Lord Vamanadev says, for example, that like we heard earlier in the third canto here, how easily and ecstatically the Lord Varahadev killed Hiranyaksha. But here Lord Vamanadev is telling to Bali Maharaj that the Lord killed Hiranyaksha only with great difficulty, kritrena. So obviously we know the Lord didn't have difficulty, but at the same time, whatever the Lord says is absolute. So how do we understand? We don't know. But I also don't want to speculate. But the Lord the point of today here is that the Lord's speech is all perfect, all beautiful. And so further, he goes then even further with Hiranyaksha, that where he says, puts himself down also that directly, that Hiranyaksha was so powerful, Hiranyakashipu, that he had subdued everyone, and even Lord Vishnu was so afraid he was just hiding in the hearts of all the living entities. The same point that I think the advisors of Kamsa, or like sometimes we hear demons telling this perverted understanding of the super soul, is that Lord Vishnu has become so afraid of the demons that he is hiding in the hearts of all living entities. So Lord Vamanadeva himself is saying like that also there. And then further also Bali Maharaj's father Virochana, how he was so affectionate towards the Brahmanas that although he knew that at one point the demigods came disguised as Brahmanas, that he granted them their whatever they were asking for. And what they were asking for was the duration of his life. So not something very easy to give. So Vamanadev glorified Bali Maharaj in this way, or rather his dynasty, so that to show, yes, you cannot take back your promise, and because he knew obviously that Shukracharya then would come and appeal, or actually forbid Bali Maharaj to grant this promise to the Lord. So and then he actually also explained already at that point justified why he is asking only for 3 steps of land and nothing more, because then he spoke on the principle of satisfaction and contentment. So he said, for example, that I do not want anything from you that is unnecessary. One who takes only according to his needs, he does not become entangled in sinful activities. And Prabhupada explains there in the purport that in that way he already indicated to Bali Maharaj that actually Bali Maharaj was occupying more land than he needed. And Prabhupada says that in the material world all distresses are due to extravagance. So and then in Bali Maharaj's response, he was very pleased by Lord Vamanadev's speech, like always, all the devotees, as we hear today as well, even though he didn't fully agree with it. And so he said, yeah, your speech is beautiful, but actually you're simply a little boy. Your intelligence is simply that of a boy. Balisya mati. And therefore, svartam, you don't know what's your real self-interest. Or, like you say now, you may need only 3 steps of land, but later in your life you would need much more, so better you ask for more now. Like that Bali Maharaj was saying. And Prabhupada explains there in the purport that actually, yes, Bali Maharaj was right, he didn't know his self-interest, or rather he didn't act for his self-interest, because the Supreme Lord is full in himself. So he doesn't have any purpose for him to go there, to beg for him to accomplish something with that. But rather he went there for the welfare of his devotees and for everyone, performing these pastimes. And Bali Maharaj, for example, he told him that I'm ruling here this whole upper middle planetary systems, low middle planetary systems, that you can take at least the whole island from me, the whole Dvipa, like our middle planetary system, we have those seven islands, of which we are the innermost in Shambhadvip. And in answer to that, the Lord Vamanadeva said, then explaining on the principle of greed, that even if I would take a whole island, one who hasn't controlled his senses, who is not satisfied with getting whatever is he's destined by the providence, by the Lord, even getting an island, he won't be satisfied. He would be greedy. He would want another island. And then there's one beautiful text, that's text 24 in the 19th chapter, where it goes like this: Yadrichaya papanena santushta vartate sukham. I'm mixing up. Okay, I'll start explaining, it will come then maybe. So Yatricha Yopapanina means that receiving that which one is destined by, according to his karma, santushto vartate sukham. So by that, being satisfied with that, then you'll get happiness. But na santushta stripya lokair achitatma pasaditahi. But if one who is achitatma, who has not controlled his senses, he will be dissatisfied even when gaining the free wills. And and there's actually, we see in Bhagavatam, in Bhagavad Gita, so many similar verses like that on where the Lord tells us about how we should be satisfied with just the bare necessities of life, just whatever comes. We shouldn't go out of our way endeavoring for material necessities. Like in end of 7th canto also, where Narada Muni explains to Yudhishthira Maharaj about the different varnas and ashramas. I believe that's in the chapter where he talks on Grihastha ashram actually, because naturally for them they have most opportunity to acquire wealth and engage in material activities. So there Narada Muni said many things on this topic, and for example in two texts, so that's 7th canto chapter 15, text 15, where Narada Muni is saying that even if a man is poor, he should not endeavor to improve his economic condition. Rather, he should just be like a great phaeton, lying in one place and taking whatever food comes out of its own accord. And Prabhupada in the Purport explains that all the members of the Krishna consciousness movement should try to spread this Krishna consciousness movement with determination, and Krishna will supply all the necessities. And in this way we should follow this achagara vritti, the principle of a phaeton not going out of his way to acquire anything. So that's how Prabhupada explains there that we should know that Krishna will supply everything to us, and we should engage in that way. And we see that actually very beautifully in our temple, how since for quite some time now there was a lot of preaching and book distribution always going on, and how beautifully the temple is flourishing, whereas in the past there was things going on like bucket collection, and where devotees went out of the way simply trying to get wealth, get some money for the temple, and struggled. And now it's not like that. Now the focus is on preaching, and the Lakshmi comes. So, and also there's two beautiful verses I quickly want to try to remember that Narada Muni tells, where he gives also in the second of those. I find it a beautiful analogy, because many times we might come across analogies or explanations, descriptions in Bhagavatam which we can't relate to so easily, because simply now our life in Kali Yuga, it's so degraded, it's so different from things which are normal in previous ages. So, but he gives a very down-to-earth example there. So in text 16, Narada Muni explains Santush, to mix it up, first on how a devotee is always satisfied. Santushtasya nirihasya svatmaramasya yatsukam kutastat kamalobena davato artehaya dishaha. Where he explains that one who is always satisfied, santushtasya, and therefore nirihasya, does not go out of his way to accumulate any material things. Why? Because by doing in this way and simply focusing on devotional service, then he's svatmara masya, he's enjoying in his own self. So yatsukam, whose happiness comes simply from that. But on the other hand, kutastat, there is such happiness for those who are kama lobhana, who are driven by desire and greed. And driven in that way, what do we see? We see the people running simply around, working so hard to try to somehow or other accumulate wealth. Davato artehaya dishaha, running here and there. And then in text 17, he gives this analogy as well for So Narada Muni says, Sada santushta manasaha sarva shiva maya dishaha shakara kantakadibhya yatopanat pada shivam. That so always being satisfied in this way, in his mind, sarva shiva maya dishaha. Wherever he goes, he only sees auspiciousness. There's nothing for him to complain because he is already satisfied. And he gives the analogy there that it is just as if someone is wearing proper shoes, good, strong shoes, then no matter where he goes on whatever surface, it can be shakara, it can be pebbles, it can even be thorns, kantaka. For him, everything is also auspicious. So, yeah, I'll conclude here. We're on time now. So any quick question or comment? Yes, Prabhu.